One of the saddest times of the year back when I was a kid was around late August or early September, when the weather starts to cool, the days get shorter, the bathing suits get put away, and the looming presence of school is felt once again. I would dread the end of these hot summer days, knowing I'd have to wait a whole 9 months before that sweet sense of freedom would return again. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Looking back now, as an old, I see that the start of the school year can mean new experiences, new friends, new hobbies, and new romances. And maybe even new YouTube channels to subscribe to, hint hint. So, in spirit of the school year starting up once more, here are my top 10 favorite school-themed games, and some fun honorable mentions as well. Number 10, the LEGO Harry Potter Collection. It's LEGO, it's Potter, it's co-op. What else do you need me to say? This game probably won't have your pulse rising in excitement, or the hair standing up on the back of your neck, but it will have you admiring how good Snape's jawline looks in LEGO form. And really, isn't that what counts? The LEGO Harry Potter Collection includes 2 separate games bundled as one, which are years 1 through 4 and years 5 through 7, and at only about $20 US, offers up Potter more Harry, Ron, and Hermione than you can shake a very expensive stick at. This one's great for all ages. Thanks to the multiplayer options, parents and kids can have fun building and battling across Hogwarts together. A terrific scholastic experience. Number 9, Doki Doki Literature Club. If you're into visual novels, you could easily fill an entire top 10 of games with school settings from this genre alone. It has endured as a popular series for over a decade, and games such as Hatoful Boyfriend and Monster Prom have found fantastic success thanks to their humor and charm. Then there's games like I Love You, Colonel Sanders that subvert the genre's expectations even more wildly, becoming a wacky, bizarre self-parody. But when it comes to subverting expectations, my favorite visual novel is still Doki Doki Literature Club. Taking place in an after-school book/poetry club where you're the only male student. Awesome, right? Well, let's just say if you follow this one to the end, and why wouldn't you? It's only about 4 hours in length. By the game's conclusion, you'll definitely feel ways about stuff. And in the end, isn't that what adolescence is all about? Number 8, Final Fantasy VIII. A lot of people may have expected Final Fantasy Type 0 here, but I'm going with Final Fantasy VIII instead. This game was in the unlucky position to follow up the massive critical and financial success of Final Fantasy VII. The 8th, surprise, mainstream entry in the series doesn't fully take place in a school, but you are essentially a student mercenary for the duration of your adventure, and many of the most memorable scenes take place in one of the 3 gardens, or schools, where soldiers, or CDs, are taught or brainwashed. You mainly play as a brown-haired orphan lad with a facial scar who has a blonde-haired rival at your magical school, and wait, this is starting to sound a little familiar. Regardless, Final Fantasy VIII is a highly enjoyable experience in my opinion, even if it isn't one of the top most popular entries from the series. Number 7, Lollipop Chainsaw.
Jeez, so emo.
Suda51's take on the classic high school slasher film, except this time the monsters had better hide from the cheerleader. Lollipop Chainsaw is a violent and grotesque game for sure, but even more than that, it's downright juvenile, which is perfect for the high school setting. You know how Link has Navi and other helpful guides to help him throughout his journeys? Well, Juliet Starling has the decapitated head of her boyfriend and local football player, Nick Carlisle, by her side. The gameplay itself is wonderfully mindless hack and slash, the humor is over the top, and the heartwarming romance between Nick and Juliet is something straight out of the Wonder Years, if it was rebooted by Tom Savini. Ah, young love. Number 6, Long Live the Queen. More of a text-based RPG than a true visual novel, Long Live the Queen is probably the most obscure game included in this top 10, but it's earned the 6th spot for me, thanks in part to the fact that the entire premise is based on taking lessons in order to level up stats and survive until your graduation. Well, coronation. Well, that and the game is just so incredibly charming. Don't let the pink princess exterior fool you. This game is vicious, as you try to survive countless murder attempts and plot twists intended to prevent you from becoming queen. Does it take place in a school? Well, no, not technically. It's the schoolroom of your castle, but you'd better stop asking questions and start taking lessons in naval strategy, or else you might find yourself the snack for a hungry kraken. Long Live the Queen is much, much less linear than most text-based games, for example, Doki Doki Literature Club, and that's a trait that some will love and some will probably hate. Maybe I'm just hot garbage, but in about 20 hours of gameplay on this one, I only made it to a victorious endgame like once or twice. The game can be found on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch for about $10, should you feel like checking it out. Number 5. Fire Emblem Three Houses. Role swap. While every other game on this list has you playing as the student, in Fire Emblem Three Houses, you're taking on the role of the teacher. Once again, three rival schools, a la Final Fantasy VIII, are at the center of this game's story, but this time you'll get to choose which to advocate for. Your various choices will affect both the game's plot and progression in between rounds of excellent tactical RPG combat. You'll spend most of the early parts of the game in the monastery, helping train, customize, and recruit your students, who you'll later take into battle. So your decisions will actually affect the makeup of your party as well. Three Houses stands at a very solid 89 on Metacritic, good enough for the second highest rated entry from a series with 16 total games.
From the beginning.
You knew it had to be on here somewhere, right? Max and Chloe's story is familiar to a lot of us at this point, as Life is Strange was a huge success and has a large fan base, as evident by its initial episodic release, subsequent sequel, and various DLCs. This game is essentially a fully realized 3D visual novel of sorts, and despite some cringe-inducing scenes at times, overall the characters are fleshed out and relatable enough that you'll find yourself wanting to accompany them further, just to see what happens next. Players who stick with the game long enough will form a connection with certain characters, and with plot branches dependent on your decisions, similar to various Telltale Games titles, Life is Strange creates suspense as to what will be Max's, Chloe's, and Arcadia Bay, Oregon's eventual fate. Alright, before we get to the top 3, let's hit it with a few quick honorable mentions. Or should I say, honor-rollable mentions? No, I shouldn't say that. Starting with Skool Daze. One of the very first school-based games ever made, Skool Daze was released on the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum back in 1984. A precursor to open-world games, this classic sees you exploring the school in an attempt to steal your report card. It was successful enough to prompt a sequel, Back to School, 1 year later. Both games are early examples of the sandbox genre. Something that's pretty appropriately titled for school, if you ask me. Corpse Party poses the question, what if school, but also death? If you need help staying up late to study this fall, this one might be eerie enough to help you want to avoid sleep anyway. Considered one of the best RPG Maker games of all time, the original version was released back in 1996, but it also had two upgraded remakes in 2006 and 2010, before eventually making its way to the 3DS in 2015 as well, exposing it to a wider audience. There's also a 2021 version and a sequel, and yeah, if I explain the rest, I'm gonna run out of time to talk about the game itself. Despite being made in RPG Maker, and being a horror game, there is no combat to speak of in Corpse Party, the main gameplay hook consisting more of exploration and survival. Of all the games on this list, this one might just be the most deadly, and that's saying something. I just had to give a quick shout out to the Frizz & Co. for their early 90s edutainment series on PC. There were a couple of Magic School Bus games, and for a little while, it was pretty much this or Solitaire for little me, so you best believe I was more than happy to keep booting up for another field trip, even if I did have to sit next to Arnold. My favorite entry was the outer space themed game. While the platforming and puzzles are admittedly basic, the atmosphere of the game was genuinely solid, especially for an early 90s kid-geared PC experience. Kids these days won't understand this, but there was once a time when getting anyone under the age of 18 to use a computer with any sort of competence was a chore. The internet barely existed, and even if you did have it, it was slower than a school bus with 3 flat tires. And in general, kids just didn't really care to learn how to type quickly. Enter Mario. Typing exercises are a bit boring, but surely Mario can make anything fun, right? S-A-D-L-Y, comma, space key. Where's my N? Ah, yes. N-O. Coming in at number 3 is Persona 5. Do you remember the days of staring at the clock in school, waiting for it to get closer to the afternoon so you could leave for the day and finally go enjoy the outside or your newest video game? Some of these days felt like 100 hours long, which is roughly the amount of time it'll take you to beat Persona 5. Probably closer to 175 if you want to do all the side quests. Thankfully, the game is a lot more entertaining than hearing Mrs. Johnson's lecture on mitochondria. Persona 5 features explosive combat, plenty of magic, summons, and strategies to employ, as well as a robust relationship building system for when you're tired of murdering demons and just want to catch a movie with your maid costume-clad waifu. Look, this game is fantastic, a must-play for RPG fans, and currently holds a 93 on Metacritic. I'm excited to see what Persona 6 has in store. Number 2, River City Ransom. A cult classic that initially flew under the radar of a lot of gamers, River City Ransom is ahead of its time in so many ways. Visually, the world is a bit like Greece, crossed with Double Dragon, but also set in Japan, and the game is extremely non-linear, a rarity for 8-bit games, but especially for retro and even current beat-em-ups. Released all the way back in April of 1989, it's technically the direct sequel to Super Dodgeball. Well, makes sense, I suppose, since we are in the school setting after all. This one sees you fighting your way across town to reach the high school and rescue your girlfriend from the evil Slick. Slick? That has to be a nickname, right? Like, who's out there naming their baby Slick? You're just asking for a supervillain son at that point. While the lack of direction in River City Ransom can make it tricky to navigate and progress, the gameplay mechanics are tight and combat is pretty responsive, which helps keep you coming back for more. And best of all, you can play it in co-op too. Taking a buddy on this quest is a blast, and it can be done easily if you have the Nintendo Switch Online service, as the game is available there, complete with multiplayer online support. Sitting at the top of its class, the valedictorian here is the PS2 classic, Bully.
Ah, so you must be Hopkins. You seem to be making yourself quite comfortable here, my boy.
I'm just trying to fit in.
Made by Rockstar Games at the height of early 3D Grand Theft Auto franchise success, Bully is another sandbox game, in the vein of Skool Daze and River City Ransom, really. But instead of being released in the prehistoric era like those last two games were, this 2006 entry was able to render a fully realized 3D world for you to explore and be a nuisance in. You'll be fighting, pranking, skitching, swimming, and kissing your way through this game's universe.
All downhill from here, my friend.
And should you decide to actually attend class for a change, you'll gain valuable power-ups for use throughout the hijinks along your journey. Dodgeball was a personal favorite minigame for me. The characters in this game definitely jump off the screen, with their stereotypical but dialed up to 11 personalities. The variety in gameplay helps keep things entertaining too. Did you wake up this morning and feel like giving someone a swirly? Well, go right ahead, but if you get caught, it's straight to detention for you, where you'll be forced to cut grass. A deliberately boring and repetitive minigame as a method of punishment. Mwah. Chef's kiss, Rockstar. You really remember what it was like to be a kid. Just another reason why Bully lands at the #1 spot.
There was never any doubt.
And that's it. To any kids starting the new school year, good luck. To any compassionate teachers starting the new school year, may God have mercy on your soul. If any game developers are watching, can we get a Ferris Bueller video game already? Yes, I know the movie is like 3.5 decades old, but I think it'd be fun. Yeah, anyways, thanks for watching this video to the end, and see you next time, Poindexters.